What other papers are necessary to get a divorce action pending started?
Well, the initial paperwork, there's also a document called a preliminary injunction that is part of the initial paperwork, and what that says, that's required in all divorce filings, and what that says essentially is maintain the status quo. It says that you're not allowed to molest or harass or give the other spouse a hard time during the pendency or during the time that this divorce is taking its period of time to run through the system until it's finalized. You can't take your spouse, neither spouse can take the other off medical insurance or life insurance policies. You can't go take all the money out of the bank account, without permission of the other side or the court's approval. So they try to keep everything calm while everything gets worked out, and that's part of that initial filing.
Here, just be crazy. If somebody wants to get in touch with you again, let's put on the screen what where you can be reached on that. And so there's your information if you'd like to get in touch with Attorney Hersch, Robert Michael Hersch. That's where you can get him. How long does it take after the papers are served to get divorced?
Well, there's a minimum period, what they call a waiting period of 60 days after the petition is filed, and the reason for that, I was just thinking about it is when the petition is filed, because you may not always have a response filed. What happens is, the reason for that law is that they don't want people. We all have disagreements with spouses. It's pretty hard to go through a marriage without having some disagreement. But the law doesn't want you to have a fight with your spouse, get mad, and go down to the court the next day and get divorced. So it's a cooling off period, essentially, so that you have enough time, which is a 60-day time period, to see if this is something you really want.
Good. I've seen that situation. There are some states where it is very rapid. We had friends once, I think, who decided to get a divorce, and they got divorced the next day, and she was on the plane the third day. So,
yeah. And maybe she was remarried a week later.
A week later, so you can do it that way. Once again, if you're interested in getting in touch with us, the Divorce TV, you'll see at the bottom of your screen our webpage, so you can get to us and read more about the show, upcoming shows, and how to contact us. Children are a big part of divorce.
Yes.
And what can you do to what happens if there are children in the divorce? What other things are different?
Well, there's different issues that arise with children, obviously. Obviously the most important one is the custody issue, and this can get a little bit confusing because there is legal custody, and then there's what we used to call, what we call now parenting time, which is a different thing. But in terms of the custody issue, there's either joint custody, where both of the parents have the same legal rights with regard to the child or children as each other, or there's sole custody, where one of the parents is making the decisions regarding the child's welfare.
Do you see more of one or the other lately?
Well,
how has that changed?
Well, I have a focus on trying to do more of the collaborative divorce model if possible. The older I get, the more I see that the adversary model of doing divorces, and this is something we'll talk about in another show.
We're going to do another show on that one, even though it sounded like we're doing it today. But we're going to do another second show, so watch for it on collaborative divorce.
But the more I see of the adversarial process can really be very detrimental to not only the parents, to the spouse in terms of being at each other in order to get through the divorce, and of course the relationship with their children. So I try to focus on joint custody as long as it's appropriate. I mean, as long as both parents are actively involved in the children's lives and there's no issues of domestic violence and that sort of thing, then hopefully joint custody is the best way to go.
And does that child support, while we're talking a little bit about children, there is something called child support. How does that work, and how does that interplay with the issue of custody and parenting? It
interplays not really with the sense of custody so much as, but it interplays with what we call the parenting time, which is how much time each parent has with the child or with the children. And to answer your first question, the child support is based upon a set of statewide guidelines, and all of the states in the United States have child support guidelines that are based on a federal model. Although they're different, the numbers are different, I believe, in each state, because the cost of living is different in each state. But what happens is basically there's a worksheet, and we have computer programs to do this, where you can manually do it.
I love the name of the computer program. Cassandra.
And it's very helpful, and they update it periodically if there are changes in the law. And you plug in the gross income from your wages and any other sources for each spouse. You put in the number of children. You put in the time that's going to be spent with the different parents. So, for example, if you have a situation where the children are going to be mostly with one parent, predominantly with one parent, but the other parent is going to be having visitation, parenting time. The theory is that that the parent who has the children most of the time, their expenses are going to be reduced by the amount of time that the other parent spends with the children. So there, you plug in the amount of days during the year, the medical insurance premium, whether there's going to be spousal maintenance or what we used to call alimony, which is a different, we haven't talked about yet. You plug all these different things into the program, and it spits out a number.
One of the things that I hear constantly, and maybe you can help explain to us, is the difference in tax consequences. A lot of issues I know are tax related. What's the tax difference between child support and spousal maintenance?
Well, the child support is what's understood to be the duty to support your children. So there is no tax deduction or income related to child support. With spousal maintenance, what we used to call alimony, there are tax considerations, and the person that is paying spousal maintenance receives a tax deduction for that on their taxes, and the person receiving the spousal maintenance has to report it as income.
And let's go back a little bit about parenting time and plans. How does that work out? How does the couples work into an arrangement with their children?
Well, the state statutes require that if you have joint custody, where both parents have the same legal rights to making decisions for the children, whether it be where they go to school or health decisions if certain operations needed to be had or certain medical treatment needs to be done, that sort of thing, then they both need to be involved. And in order to joint custody with the court, you have to do what's called a parenting plan, which is just a document that lays out where the children will be living during the year. You know, if it's during the school year, they're going to be living with mother a certain number of days, you know, Monday through Friday, and then with father on every other weekend or every weekend, or is it going to be 1 week on, 1 week off, or 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, whatever.
When you're doing these kind of parenting plans or some of the other issues, are these cut in stone or can they be changed?
You mean later on?
Yeah.
Of course, because circumstances change. As kids get older, you know, what's appropriate for a child of 5 is probably not going to be appropriate for children when they're 10 or 12 or 15, when they become teenagers. As we all know, they have their own minds and they want to go out with their friends, and so they may not want to adhere to this kind of a schedule as when they were 5. And these can be changed. Of course, the two parents can change them among themselves. I think the court would like it if you filed what we call an amended parenting plan, so the court file would reflect the differences, but frankly, most people, I don't believe they do, and most people probably don't do it in writing as things change unless there's a problem. And in my experience, the courts are so busy that if you're getting along with your spouse and you're able to work it out and the parenting time is working out for you and the children, then the court is fine with that. I'm not speaking for the court, but in my experience...
I think it's certainly been my experience, too, that the people need the court in order to get a divorce, but later on, if they can do it on their own, they do it on their own.
Sure.
And I also sometimes tell people there's no divorce police here to enforce things, so that unless they have a problem doing it. But that's a good question. If there is a breakdown in the agreement, what happens? How is it?
Well, if there's a breakdown, what we do in the settlement agreements that I draft, and I know many other lawyers, too, is that we say to the parties, if there's a problem later on with parenting time, then we suggest they come back into a mediation kind of a mode, where they go to a neutral mediator who's independent and someone trained in that area, and that person can help them work up an agreement before they go back into court and take, you know, all the costs involved with that and legal fees and the court's time, and essentially, you know, having to say not so nice things about each other usually has a detrimental effect. So.
One of the things that I